Hi, all of you. Good afternoon. Yes, good afternoon, good evening, all of you. Hello, Rachit, Isha, Hemant. Not audible. Good evening, Alehan Serval. Okay. Am I audible to all of you? Yes? Okay, fine. Yeah, my day is fine. I'm good, healthy, alive, kicking. Ishfaq. Okay. So we start off now. So last class I have. Oh, yes, Rahul. So I had told you a couple of things. One is we told you we will upload all the model answers for you. I think 20, 22 जो भी answers हैं, some of which you have seen as a part of your foundation class also, and plus some bit more. Yeah, Charu. Yeah, offline. Can we settle down now? All offline students, can we stop the murmur? Okay, ठीक है. So one is I've given you the questions, and I expect all of you to please start memorizing those. Okay. So despite all the alert that I gave you, some of you still reached out to me telling me याद नहीं हो रहा है. देखो ये चीज ना दिमाग से निकालना पड़ेगा, याद नहीं हो रहा है. Okay. आपको याद करना पड़ेगा. Anybody who has given the mains examination, you will know you do not have time to think in the exam hall and write down. You can only have few seconds to quickly restructure and start writing. You can't remember is a statement I don't want to hear at all. You have to remember. And whatever I give you as a part of answers, that's your priority. पहले वो कर लो आप लोग. Second, whatever we are teaching, I'll discuss some techniques. I'll discuss some methods, structuring, and we are on. Okay? So I have given the question list to you. I think कितना 20 question है या 22 question जो भी है. You start memorizing, and from these questions itself, आपका जो पहला, yeah, 10 questions. Okay, then the next round will give it today itself. Okay, that's the reason is maybe if you dump at the same time, you might have an issue, but we'll give you as many questions. Now, from these questions, you might receive 10 plus 10 or 10 plus 12, whatever. आपका जो पहला practice test है, okay, in the practice test, I will ask you 12 questions or 14 questions and will give you 2 hours to write down. These will be from these questions alone. That's a surprise element. आपको 20 question दिया है, write down 12 of them or 14 of them, whatever. Okay, that is your task. You will do this. Okay. The second task is I'm discussing some answers with you in the class, almost like an answer structure. Write it, okay, and finalize it in one go. I'll try to cover whatever tricky ones we can. Okay, so the class discussions are there. Now, class discussions mein, I will do 3 things. One is I will enrich your content. I will help you structure, okay, the answers, and in some cases, I might even help you write a proper answer. Plus, maybe after 1 or 2 more sessions, आप लोग class में भी लिखेंगे answer. I'll throw up a question, ask you start to think and start writing 7 minutes, 8 minutes, whatever we have. It'll be a mix of all of this together. Let's be okay with the process. It has worked for others, it'll work for you also. Yes, you can memorize. But one thing I suggested, when you're memorizing, okay, see if you can modify some. It's romantic now. So online students, since morning we have some power issues. Okay, so abhi power gaya, it comes back in 5, 6, 7 minutes, whatever. So I'm conserving the energy, so switch off some lights here. In case it gets disrupted, okay, we will log back again. Okay, so be patient there. So I said memorization mein, you please try to modify. Modifications ka, there are 3 reasons. One is that you need to draw some diagrams. If it gets disconnected, you will join back again. फिर मैं पढ़ाऊंगा क्या? ठीक है. Online students, it might get disconnected. We log back again. Okay? ना गंदा सीटी मार रहा है. Yes, I've done that, Harsh. कितना खुश है दिनेश, आज हॉलीडे है. बंद कर दो, नो पॉइंट. क्या बंद किया? लाइन आ गई. अच्छा ठीक है, all of you can hear me online. Okay, ठीक है, we'll manage. ठीक है, it'll get a bit warm, so romance में warm वैसे भी होता है. So yes, the urban heat island. This is the urban class island, heat island. ठीक है. So ठीक है, let's start off now. The next question we're discussing is, write the question please. Next question is, what are gradient winds? What are gradient winds? How do the forces resolve? What are gradient winds? How do the forces resolve in the development of different types of tertiary level circulations. In different types of tertiary level circulations. So you wouldn't have, most of you would have heard about this. Let me explain it to you. Now see, gradient winds essentially are the cyclonic and the anticyclonic winds. So what are gradient winds? How do the forces resolve in the development of local circulation systems or local winds? How are the forces resolving in the development of different types of local circulation systems? Let me start off now. First, sun lo pehle, then I'll give you some points. Now, what are gradient winds? Gradient winds are cyclones and anticyclones, both of them. Why we call them as gradient winds? Because the pressure gradient force is radial forces. It's like, a mountain from where the river is flowing from all sides, or a valley where all rivers converge. So agar valley hai, niche low pressure hai, Okay, and all the winds are coming towards the center. अगर elevation है, यहाँ पर high pressure है, all the winds are moving out. That's why we call these as gradient winds. So this is a low pressure gradient wind, which is a cyclone. This is the high pressure gradient wind, which is an anticyclone. Okay, so anticyclones and cyclones are called as gradient winds. That's one point. Second point is, in any gradient wind, because of a local low pressure or a local high pressure, the winds are all rotatory in nature. They start rotating. Agar cyclones hoga, they start rotating in the anti-clockwise direction in the northern hemisphere. Agar anticyclone hai, they will rotate in clockwise in the northern hemisphere. So there are two lines here. Okay, the first point I said, the gradient winds are local rotatory systems. Gradient winds are local rotatory systems of winds. Put hyphen, because of local low pressure, with the winds converging, or local high pressure with the winds diverging. Okay, that is the gradient winds are cyclones and anticyclones. Gradient winds are cyclones and anticyclones. Gradient winds, I repeat. Can you all hear me online? Forget about seeing me. Okay. Yes, you can hear me, that's all. I'm not using the board because I'm conserving power. Okay. If you can see, you can hear me, that's good enough. So I said, jo gradient winds are rotatory systems, and they rotate because of a local low pressure or a local high pressure. And in a rotatory system, because high or low pressure, there will be cyclones and anticyclones. That's the first paragraph. I told last time, until your question has a technical word, try not to define. But here a technical word hai, what are gradient winds? So you will explain. Define as in, try explaining it. What is it? So any cyclone or any anticyclone is called as a gradient wind. That's one. Number two, write down. Number two. Okay. In a rotating system, there is an additional component of centripetal force. There is an additional component of centripetal force that makes the rotatory motion possible. Okay. So see, in other type of winds, आपके पास तीन force लगता है. What are the three forces? One is the pressure gradient force. The second is the Coriolis force, and third is the friction. But friction, more or less, is a part of the PGF itself in the negative direction. So friction, PGF, and Coriolis. And Coriolis always acts at 90 degrees to the moving wind, not PGF. So three forces are already there as a part of any wind system. In a gradient wind, you have an additional force called as the centripetal force that keeps the system rotating. Agar ye nahi hoga, rotation will not be possible. Okay, so write down here. In a gradient wind, there are four forces that act together. In a gradient wind, there are four forces that act together. The four forces are one is PGF. The four forces are, one is PGF. Number two is friction. Number two is friction. Number three is Coriolis force. Number three is Coriolis force. And number four is the centripetal force. Okay. So PGF responsible for the initial driving of the winds. The primary driver is the P. Likh lo side mein. The PGF hyphen, the primary driver of the wind. Friction force, okay, slows down the wind. Slows down the wind. Coriolis force deflects the wind. Coriolis force deflects the wind. And Coriolis depends on Earth's rotation, the PGF strength, and the friction force. Coriolis depends on Earth's rotation. It depends on the PGF and depends on the friction. So we all know this, that if the speed of the wind is less, the deflection will be less. So if you have got more friction, the deflection will be less. And the fourth one, जो आपका centripetal force है, that's responsible for rotating the wind. So see, it's your choice. Wherever there is a centripetal force, a counter centrifugal bhi hoga. Okay, it's like an action-reaction type. So you don't have to write both down. You write any one of them. Okay, so what holds it together is actually centripetal. But agar centripetal hoga, you also have a centrifugal also. So you don't need to write both of them. Write any one of them that you want to write down. That's perfectly fine, Rahul. That's also okay. Okay, these are the four forces. Now, how do they resolve? I would have drawn this on the board, but sun lijiye aap. Listen to me and I'll try explaining it without the board. How it resolves. Now see, all of you online and offline, look at this. Say this is a high pressure. Say this is a high pressure belt. And this is a low pressure belt. The winds always move from high towards low. Okay, the winds will move from high, which is here. They'll move towards the low. This is the PGF. Okay. Now, when we have a geostrophic wind, kya hoga? The Coriolis force will turn the wind, correct? It's turning the wind towards right, it'll turn, and ultimately the Coriolis force becomes opposite, and the wind is moving, okay, at 90 degrees to the PGF. Or wind is moving at 90 degrees to the Coriolis force. Is samajh mein aa raha aapko? So draw the diagram, please. So put a dot, or you can draw a line. The line is the high pressure. Okay. From that line, draw a straight line upwards, which is PGF. From the line opposite direction, may draw Coriolis force. Draw Coriolis force. And you draw the geostrophic force, bicho beach. In between, draw the geostrophic force. So typically, this is what it looks like. So say my stylus is PGF, my pen is the Coriolis, and the wind moves like this. Okay, the wind direction is like this. Is it okay, all of you here? Okay. Now listen what happens. When there is, so in this diagram, low pressure kahan par hai? Low pressure yahan par hai. Isn't it? Low pressure is here. When you have a cyclone, okay, so the winds are rotating counterclockwise like this. The wind should have, all of you watch here, the wind should have been like this. Okay, ye high pressure hai, ye low pressure hai. The wind is like this. Okay, in a cyclone, the wind starts turning like this. All good here? Acha, now, what force is responsible for turning the wind like this? It is Coriolis. So Coriolis becomes more and more powerful because the wind speed is higher. In a geostrophic wind, is the PGF changing? All of you online. In a very fast wind, or in a geostrophic wind, or any wind, will the PGF change? No. PGF is high minus the low pressure, correct? What is changing? The wind speed is changing. Why is the wind speed changing? Because the friction is less. So as the wind picks up more and more speed, what is increasing? Coriolis. So what is turning the wind? Coriolis. So geostrophic जो बना है, ये क्यों बना है? Because of Coriolis force, correct? Okay. So Coriolis is turning the wind, and now the wind has become perfectly geostrophic. Now I'm saying something else happens on this, and the wind starts to rotate. Okay. Rotate towards what? Towards the low pressure. जब ऐसे घूम रहा है, so is the Coriolis becoming strong or weak? Have you got the point here? See, if ये Coriolis है, ये Coriolis है. If the Coriolis becomes strong, means what? The wind must turn like this. Okay, like this का मतलब क्या है? Center में फिर high pressure आ जाएगा. Correct. What I'm saying is, in a cyclone, the wind, rather than going straight like this, the wind is turning like this. Okay. Like this का मतलब है, something else is pulling the wind more inside and weakening the Coriolis. Can I explain that now? ये क्या अंदर खींच रहा है? That is the centripetal force. So in a cyclone, the centripetal force is making which force stronger? PGF. Which becomes weaker? Coriolis. Because of which we say that a cyclone is a subgeostrophic. This is geostrophic, where the Coriolis is strong and has pulled it here. But in a cyclone, the Coriolis has become weaker. The centripetal force is strengthening the PGF. That is why it is turning like this. We call this as subgeostrophic. So one type of gradient wind is the subgeostrophic wind, which is a cyclone. Okay? Our discussion is, what are the types of the gradient winds and how are the forces resolving? ये पूछा मैंने आपको आप, right? How the force resolve? In a vector diagram, you will show PGF like this, you will show Coriolis like this, and you will show the centripetal force like this. The centripetal force is strengthening, okay, the PGF, but it's weakening the Coriolis. So the geostrophic जो balance है, it's because of strong Coriolis. But now we have got a weaker Coriolis. That's why we call this as subgeostrophic, as in less than geostrophic. Okay, so write down all of you. So types of geostrophic, the types of gradient winds. How will you show it? I'm showing you in my motions here. I can't draw it because I don't have the power right now. Okay, so how do you draw? So give a heading: types of gradient winds. Types of gradient winds. Number one is cyclones. Number one is cyclones. Okay, in cyclones, what happens is that right down here. In cyclones, the centripetal force strengthens the PGF. The centripetal force strengthens the PGF, countering the Coriolis. Countering the Coriolis. Okay. Achha, can you write in other way also? Can you write it out as the centrifugal force? लिख सकते हैं आप लोग? So if the centripetal force is like this, centrifugal उल्टा होगा. Okay, so let's keep the reference to centripetal. Otherwise, आपका language change हो, that's something else. Okay, because if it is centrifugal, then you'll write down that the centrifugal force weakens the PGF. That's, you should know what you're comparing. So you can write the answer with centripetal force reference, or you can write the answer with centrifugal reference. अगर centripetal लिखोगे, say centripetal is strengthening the PGF. If write down as centrifugal, write down it is weakening the PGF. Okay? So draw the diagram in that case. So you draw, okay, the diagram. Okay, upwards is PGF. उसी के साथ में draw one more line as the centripetal force. Opposite में draw the Coriolis force and draw the wind is turning towards the low pressure. Yes. Because the pressure is no longer an elongated belt. The pressure has become a localized low pressure. इसमें क्या है? All the PGF will be towards the center. The ye convert is asking me, why does this convert into a system of rotation? Because in a cyclone or anticyclone, the pressure patterns are no longer linear belts. They have now become circular systems. ये linear belt high pressure था, अब वो छोटा होके low pressure हो गया, 1 point हो गया. The linear belt was low pressure, it has now become a small, low pressure. So this, the isobars changing creates all of this. Okay, so I repeat, PGF in one direction, Coriolis in the opposite direction, draw centripetal along PGF and draw the turn like this as the cyclone. So draw the vector diagram. This becomes the vector diagram for, and in this case, write down this point, that the centripetal force weakens the Coriolis. The centripetal force weakens the Coriolis, or the centrifugal force weakens the PGF. आप either चीज कह सकते हो. The centripetal weakens the Coriolis, or the centrifugal weakens the PGF. Therefore, it's called as a subgeostrophic wind. It's called as a subgeostrophic wind. Yes. You know the mechanism, then you're on. लिख लिया आप लोगों ने? All done here? Okay, now look at the next one. Now see. Say, this is the high pressure. All of you watch again. This is high pressure. This is the low pressure. Okay, so it becomes higher like this. Anticyclone means what? Okay, so this is the high pressure. It becomes more and more high. Okay, so this is Coriolis. Agar anticyclone hoga, it will move, like this now. It's moving towards more stronger high pressure center here. So this is Coriolis. This is geostrophic wind. When it turns like this, it means the Coriolis is becoming weaker. When it turns like this, kya hoga? It becomes strengthening. So this anti-clockwise is cyclone. This clockwise is anticyclone. In an anticyclone, what is stronger now? Okay, the Coriolis becomes stronger. And the Coriolis is strong by the centrifugal or petal. अगर ये ऐसे घूम रहा है तो नीचे क्या होगा? Centripetal. Petal means always towards the center. When it turns like this is the center. So this is centripetal like this. When it turns like this, the centripetal is now towards the high pressure. I hope you got the point. So in an anticyclone, the wind is turning towards the high pressure center here. As a घूम रहा है, which means what is stronger now? The Coriolis is stronger with the centripetal. Have you got the point? So how do you draw the vector diagram in this? Yeah. So any force towards center is centripetal. That is, as I remember this back in my college school days, petal means pass में होगा. Okay, so pass खींच रहा है. A fugal, F for far, this is going away. So anything pulling towards center is centripetal. Okay, so the wind is turning like this. The force pulling inside will be centripetal. In a cyclone, the centripetal is along the PGF. In an anticyclone, it's towards along the Coriolis. Is it okay, all of you here? Write down this point. So number two type is anticyclones. The second type of gradient force is anticyclones. In anticyclones, the winds are moving out from the central high pressure. The winds are moving out from central high pressure and rotating clockwise in the northern hemisphere. The winds are moving out of the central high pressure and rotating clockwise in the northern hemisphere. Okay. The forces balance as, draw the diagram now. You have got PGF. PGF हमेशा high से low जाएगा. You have the PGF like this, Coriolis like this, and the wind is turning like this. Okay. The wind turns like this. Draw that. So PGF upwards, Coriolis downwards, and along Coriolis you draw centripetal force. Along the Coriolis itself, you draw the centripetal force. Keep it parallel to the Coriolis force. All done? So you draw another line, that's all. एक ऐसे बनाओ Coriolis, इसके साथ ही बना दो centripetal force. इसमें क्या है? The Coriolis force is strengthened by the centripetal force. The Coriolis force is strengthened by the centripetal force. And hence, it's called as super geostrophic. And hence, it's called as the super geostrophic wind, which are anticyclones. So I've discussed all the three now. What are gradient winds? Number two, what are the types of gradient winds? There are two types of gradient winds. One is cyclone, other is anticyclone. And third, I've discussed how the forces are resolving, how the balance happens. So, Jayant, actually PGF does not change. The PGF is like, it's like I'm pulling something. I'm pulling something. You come and help me. So actually, mera force to utna hi hai. You help me, so you make me stronger. But does not mean I'm pulling more. I can pull at, say, 10 Newton's force. Mera ye maximum hai. You come and help me, plus component called A. Total force is now 10 of mine and A of yours. So my force change thodi ho raha hai. It's just that you help me, so we can pull more. So that's how. The PGF never changes. What happens is an additional component, which is the centripetal force. Now, the additional one can be along PGF or can be along the Coriolis force. If along PGF, we call that as a cyclone. If along Coriolis, we call that as the anticyclone. Along the cyclone, we call that as subgeostrophic. If anticyclone, we call that as super geostrophic. That's all. There are two types of gradient winds. One point I forgot to mention. You can go back to your first line, write down that one. The gradient winds are a special type of geostrophic winds. The gradient winds are special type of geostrophic winds. They are a special case of geostrophic winds. So Ananya, ये तो समझाया मैंने. When I say super geostrophic, the Coriolis is stronger. When I say subgeostrophic, the Coriolis is weaker. The cyclone is a subgeostrophic, anticyclone is a super geostrophic. All fine here? Now look at this. Yes. Yeah, it's towards center. The question is center में क्या है? Center में low है या high है? Let me repeat. Centripetal is always towards the center. The question is center में क्या है? Center में low pressure है या center में high pressure है? अगर center में low pressure है, okay, the centripetal is towards low pressure. अगर center में high pressure है, the centripetal is towards high pressure. It's not that कि centripetal उल्टा हो गया. What changes is the gradient changing. So when the centripetal is towards low pressure, we call that as subgeostrophic. When it's towards low pressure, high pressure is called as supergeostrophic. Yeah, one more. Somebody else shows your hand there. Okay, fine. Now my input here. Now dekho. This year, last year they had asked something on what are the forces on the winds. This year they've asked about geostrophic wind already. So I doubt they will ask you this directly anymore. But isko aap use karoge kahan par? Any question on cyclones, aap ye paragraph add karoge. Is it okay, all of you? So they ask you what are cyclones? What are the weather conditions because of cyclones? Okay, explain tropical cyclones. ये पूछ सकते हैं because cyclone पूछा नहीं है. This year they have asked anti-cyclones, correct? So these are those inputs that help you enrich your content. So a straight question, what are cyclones? How are they developed? And discuss whatever weather stages. So introduction mein hi 2-3 lines. What are cyclones? Local low pressure systems, rotatory systems, draw the diagram, and then write down that cyclones are a special type of gradient winds. They are also called as subgeostrophic winds. The vector diagrams are the way you can explain, and then you're on. So you must have, this is what even, it's not all of you have met him. One of the days I had invited one of the people who's qualified, Vikas, to talk to some of you, and that's what he said. You must have the intelligence कि आपके पास जो content है, okay, how can you use that content? अब मैंने ये पढ़ाया, trust me, the same question will not be asked to you. वो कुछ और पूछेगा. You have to make the circumstances such that you can start adding whatever you have read beyond the syllabus. So अगर मुझे question पूछा, okay, write a note on, okay, the monsoon type of climate. I write a note on the precipitation patterns of India. So मैंने डालना है cyclones and 2 lines on cyclones are subgeostrophic because of this with a vector diagram. So that is an intelligent part. आप इसको कैसे use करोगे as a part of enriching your content. All fine here? Okay. Let's move on. Let's move on. The next question is, write down. Discuss the potential repercussions of altered hydrological cycles. Discuss the repercussion of altered hydrological cycles in the recent times. Repercussions of altered hydrological cycles of the recent times. Explain with examples. Explain with examples. Discuss the repercussions of altered hydrological cycles in recent times. Okay, explain with examples. Explain with examples. Now listen. Hydrological cycle is part of the syllabus. इसमें एक ही बार पूछा हुआ क्वेश्चन है. How does evaporation play a role? I doubt they will ask you a generic question on hydrological cycle, but they can always ask you something around the mechanism, the impact. Okay, they can ask something about what are the processes. So I'm keeping ready for that. Okay. So at a very, very simple level, what is the hydrological cycle? It's a way of depicting how water moves on our planet and through different subsystems. ये तो है आपका. Okay. How the water moves from the oceans, in the atmosphere, the clouds, it rains on the land, percolation, streams, evaporation from the trees, the leaves from the land, the water back into the sea. That's a part of the system. Okay. So now, इसको आप कैसे लिखोगे? It looks like a smart answer befitting your standard of study. So don't just write down the regular words. Okay. So write down now. Now, according to according to IPCC, hydrological cycle, according to IPCC, hydrological cycle is a depiction of, hydrological cycle is a depiction of how water in its different states and forms, how water in its different states and different forms passes through sequence of transitions, through different subsystems of the earth, through the different subsystems of the earth. There are two ways of depicting a hydrological cycle. There are two ways of depicting a hydrological cycle. Number one is the global hydrological cycle. Number one is the global hydrological cycle, which is a global depiction of how water moves, which is a global depiction of how water moves through the oceans, atmosphere, onto the land, passing through streams, clouds, and back to the oceans. So एक type का depiction है the global hydrological cycle. The second type of depiction is the terrestrial hydrological cycle. The second type of depiction is the terrestrial hydrological cycle. The terrestrial one is more about how the water moves on the land. At a relatively smaller regional or local scale. So the point is, say I have rainfall in Delhi. अब थोड़ी बोलेंगे the water evaporated in Bay of Bengal. The water has come as cloud to Delhi, rained here, and the water goes back to the Bay of Bengal. Yes, it happens at a large scale. But local kya hai? The evaporation is from parts of Delhi itself. The rainfall is at Delhi. The water percolates in the groundwater of Delhi itself. This is at a local scale, at a regional scale. Think of monsoons. The reality is the waters in the Indian Ocean are coming from Pacific, from Indian Ocean also, or Atlantic Ocean also. But we don't talk at that scales. The two ways of looking at how the water moves. One is the global scale. The second is a relatively smaller scale and more reference to the land. Write down. The hydrological cycle is the foundation of all other cycles. Including carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, and even rock cycle. See, what do we, this could be a question, okay? So why do we say this? Because dekho, in a nitrogen cycle, or think of carbon cycle. In a carbon cycle, a very important component are the forests, right? The forests absorb, the forests release, and the forest can't survive without rainfall. In the nitrogen cycle, a very important component here are the thunderstorms, the lightning that helps in nitrification. Again, you have got the soil life forms which can trap nitrogen, and they can't operate again without water and oxygen. Rock cycle kya hai? Rock is formed, erosion happens, sedimentation happens, फिर volcanism happens. In the rock cycle, the process of sedimentary rock formation can't happen without the hydrological cycle. Because hydrological cycle matlab hai the action of the rivers, the action of the glaciers, the action of winds also. All of this can't operate if there's no water here. We say the foundation of all other cycles is the hydrological cycle. In some ways we say, because of this, hydrological cycle is the fundamental to life and social development. I mean, all life, civilization began because of water, right? If no water, I will not have any of this. So this is a fundamental statement that hydrological cycle is the foundation of all other cycles and whatever we see as human development. Okay. Now, right next. Now, aap kuch data le lo. Okay. Write down. The following are the important components and the sub-processes of an hydrological cycle. Oh, finally. The following are the important components and the sub-processes of an hydrological cycle. Take a list. Evaporation and evapotranspiration. Evaporation. So take a list 1, 2, 3, 4. Evaporation and evapotranspiration is one component and one sub-process. Number 2 is precipitation and the processes, precipitation and the processes associated with it. Okay, so stability, rising air, condensation, okay, all sab milakar it is precipitation and its processes. Number 3, the runoff component, and the infiltration component. The runoff component and the infiltration component that forms a surface flows and groundwater. That forms surface flows and the groundwater. Okay, so I said, kya components hain? One is evaporation and evapotranspiration. One. Number 2, I said, the precipitation and all process linked to precipitation. It also includes snowfall, hailstones, water, whatever we have. The third I said is the water on the land. The water running on the land like rivers called as runoff. And what goes inside is the infiltration. These are the 3 main components and processes of hydrological cycle. Okay. Now, I'm just giving you this diagram and I want you to copy this down. This is in your climatology textbook, page number 152. Just timely. I'll explain the diagram to all of you. Then you will make this diagram. You all see this? Yeah. Page number 152. In fact, I forgot to say this. I would have wanted you get your book also. We can show some of the discussions here. Okay, so watch here. So what is, and this is a diagram aap use karoge apne answers mein. Okay, so it is precipitation, interception storage, as in when water falls, water can temporarily, okay, get intercepted by leaves. Leaves ne pakad liya. Maybe there is a building, some amount of water is held in the building roof. It's interception. Uske baad, it falls along the stems. The buildings can have pipes. The water falls through the pipes. That is your through fall, the stem flows. From here, they enter surface storage. It could be river, it could be tanks, it can be lakes. Okay. Some amount of this also infiltrates, it percolates down into the soil. Okay. From the surface storage, it can run off, it becomes channel, it becomes a proper river. Okay, proper river, a proper stream. Okay. Then soil moisture. Soil moisture, it can percolate and become groundwater. From the groundwater, we can have evaporation called as capillary rise. Okay. And we can have evaporation anywhere. From the leaves, evaporation. From the surface storage, lakes and ponds, evaporation. From the soil, also evaporation. The groundwater evaporation. All of this is evapotranspiration. Ultimately, this will feed the precipitation. Okay. And the runoff, everything adds up into channel flow. So some channel flow comes from the lakes. Some channel flow comes from the water moving through the soil. Some river water comes from the groundwater also. So groundwater se river mein, soil se river mein, surface lake se river mein. And all of this together becomes the total channel runoff. Iske beyond agar chala jayega, because deep transfer means it's a very deep water, what in geographical terms we call as phreatic water. It becomes a part of the deep water systems of the crust. Ye tab wapas aayega jab when you have volcanism systems here. So this is the diagram of your hydrological cycle. So please, it's not difficult at all. Okay, if you can recall also, precipitation, you have got interception storage, then you have got stem flow through charge. It comes towards surface storage. It now comes towards the soil. From soil to groundwater, groundwater to deep storage. And from each component's evaporation, evapotranspiration, from each component in the stream, it becomes a part of the channel flow. Okay? So all of you see the diagram and draw this, please. जो गिरने के पहले पकड़ लेता, say there's a tree. Okay. Waterfalls, the leaves intercept, the branches intercept. अगर बिल्डिंग है, कुछ पानी फंसेगा रूफ में, it get intercept और फिर यहां से flow करता है into storage systems. So can you all draw this, please? Yes. Because of, again, temperature. No, temperature is dry conditions. Okay. Plus, जो particle के बीच में gap है, is actually a type of an adhesion reaction. Okay. So water can rise up through the gaps. Provided there is dry conditions, the water can start rising. It's one type of evaporation, you can say. Okay? In the soil. In the soil, yes. No, no, no. इसमें कोई tectonic नहीं है. Nothing tectonic here. Here, draw this, please. The whole agenda is how do you make your answers look smart? हाँ, yes, इस साइड में सारा evaporation ही तो है और क्या है? Through flow means it passes through, okay, along the stems, along the drain pipes.
Infiltration and percolation are same.
Yeah, same. Oh, the page turned. Yes, same. Indranil. Percolation, infiltration. Okay, you use the word infiltration for the above soils. Or deep jayega to more percolation, but you can use it as interchangeable terms. Interception मतलब होता है बीच में जो होगा intercept before it falls on the ground proper. Capillary rise, the water will move up along the soil. ये ऊपर rise करेगा. keeps the contrast better. Through fall and through flow matlab through the, okay, some pipe. Through fall means along. Charu, use these terms interchangeably. Itna technical words nahi hai. All done? अब बेटा ये डायग्राम तो अच्छा बनना ही चाहिए, मैप जो नहीं है इसमें, ठीक है, इसको डायग्राम नहीं बोलते, इसको बस स्कीमेटिक बोलते हैं। इतना भी ना हुआ तो फिर कैसे होगा? Yes, the base flow along the groundwater will ultimately recharge rivers, correct? Rivers में जो पानी है, it comes from the rainfall, it also comes from the underground flow systems. Okay, now let's move on. नहीं कर पाए तो you can go back and check your textbook once. Back to your notes, please. So I've explained what is hydrological cycle in a more smart set of words. What are the components and processes? One important point was it is one of the most foundational processes that controls all the other cycles, and a flowchart depiction of how water moves. Okay, now write down here. Write down. The following are the factors. The following are the factors that have altered the hydrological cycle. That have altered the hydrological cycle. So most of us will write down as climate change. We stop there, right? और क्या लिखेंगे आप इसमें? If I ask you, why has hydrological cycle changed? आप क्या लिखेंगे? Global warming, climate change, more evaporation. Okay, what else will write down? Okay, so see, there are three components of this process. One component is an evaporation component, बताया मैंने आपको. Second, evaporation, precipitation as one component. Second component is after water falls down, water runs along the surface. वो भी component है. एक third है, which is infiltration or percolation. So when I say hydrological cycle changes, okay, the change is in evaporation and rainfall. The change is in how the water moves on the surface, and the change is on how it percolates in the soil. The change of hydrological cycle is not simply global warming alone. Global warming can change the evaporation component, ठीक है, and maybe rainfall. But we have got something else also. Remember, rainfall requires some dust particles. It requires aerosols. It requires condensation nuclei, which pollutions can change, correct? You can eject more aerosols. You can have more dust particles. So when you talk about change of hydrological cycle, don't limit it to evaporation alone. Now, उसके बाद ये जो flows होता है surface पे, is it not because of change of human activities altering the slopes also? So a flat slope has now become steeper. जो steep था आपने flat कर दिया. Okay, there were forests, आपने वो change कर दिया. And third, okay, the percolation also gets impacted. So I doubt if you write down about how does it change, okay, you should not limit it to evaporation alone, which most students do. So what are the process of factors that alter the hydrological cycle? So the factor processes are: number one, climate change, global warming. This changes precipitation and the evaporation component. It changes the precipitation and evaporation component. Both of this can become fast. Both of this can intensify. Warmer oceans, more evaporation. More evaporation, more rainfall. Okay, so these two have intensified. Number two, changing atmospheric chemistry, as in changing atmospheric composition, can again impact precipitation and evaporation. The atmosphere becomes warmer, so more water vapor holding capacity. The atmosphere has more amount of aerosols, dust particles. So I'll have again more condensation happening. So changing atmospheric chemistry or changing atmospheric composition is again can impact precipitation and evaporation. Okay. The third, changing or alterations in the nature of the slopes. Alteration in the nature of slopes. So this is construction. This is slope modifications. Okay. This also includes deforestation. This also includes urban and development infrastructure. So what does this do? This changes, this alters the surface runoff. It also alters percolation and infiltration. It also alters percolation and infiltration. Okay? So you could always add one. Now you tell me, do you know some data here? In terms of water usage, which sector is the maximum user of water? Agriculture. Any idea about how much? More than 95% or 90%. ठीक है. Which means the hydrological cycle का बहुत important modifications by agriculture. Give me some examples of how do we modify that? In irrigation, correct. Your tube well irrigation, the canal diversion, the construction of dams. Okay. So all of this, yes, drip to last mein Pranjal. Okay. So ये जो हम कह रहे हैं, changing in the slope nature, changing in the slope modifications and all of this. So यहाँ पर आप add कर सकते हो examples of surface alteration and a change in the flow systems. Okay, example of this is agriculture and irrigation. So the construction of dams, the construction of canals and water diversions, the construction of tube wells, okay, the diversion of water by interlinking of the rivers by urbanization. Well, let's say add kar sakte ho, but these canals, water diversions, tube well, groundwater extraction, okay, diversion, okay, because of interlinking of the rivers, diversions, okay, and the interlinking, the projects hain, and the interlinking of the rivers. You could put this, okay, as a part of one example. How is the hydrological cycle getting altered? Yes, uske baad, see, once you have done this, फिर आपका dimension खुल जाता है. My problem is that if you write down an answer at this level and you write down like a school child, typical diagram क्या बनाते हैं हम लोग? Okay, see, this is the typical diagram most of you are guilty of thinking at least, if not drawing. Okay, ये tree यहाँ बना दिया. Right? You have drawn this. You have drawn this. You have drawn this. Water runs here and water percolates here. ये तो है आपका और क्या है? And this is the ocean here. Okay, at this stage एकदम pathetic है ना ये. बीच में आपने यहाँ पर birds बना दिया, beautify कर दिया, पीछे आपने sun दिखा दिया, यहाँ पे आपके नौका बनाकर चप्पू चला दिया. Okay, it's so pathetic. It must look like a person who is qualifying for this level of examination. So, इस type के diagrams absolutely no. The smarter one is the flow chart you have drawn. And alterations is not simply about global warming alone. ये भी important alteration है. Most of us will miss this out completely. And you are discussing that agriculture irrigation. Why? Because we have said that more than 90%, more than 95% of all surface water in India is in the agriculture sector. You are applying some of the data that you have. Yes, Ajay. No drawing like Majnu Bhai. Those who know, they have got it, otherwise ignore. Changing atmospheric chemistry, Shweta, means you are changing the atmospheric composition. You are having more pollutants, you are having more aerosols, you have got more dust particles, you have got more amount of water vapor, cloud seeding, absolutely. One example of alteration is also cloud seeding. Okay, so what is hydrological cycle? What are the processes a part of hydrological cycle? How it gets altered? We have some discussions here. Okay, and the fourth is what is the impact of this? But before that, let me give you some data about this. जब मैं यहाँ लिखा है ना, that is global is definitely very important. इसको आप ignore नहीं कर देना. This global warming, it operates in 3-4 ways. So back to next one. Okay, how does climate change and global warming? How does climate change and global warming impact hydrological cycle? And I'm giving you straight from certain IPCC documents. How does climate change and global warming impact hydrological cycle? Number one, temperature change. Temperature change. Till 2020, from 1970s till 2020, from 1970s, the increase of temperature has been, the increase in the temperature has been more than 0.25 degrees centigrade per decade. 0.25 degrees centigrade per decade. This impacts more than 25% more evaporation, or this results in more than 25% change in evaporation, और बढ़ जाएगा आपका. That's one. Number two is impact of cryosphere. Impact of cryosphere. Since 1970s, Arctic Sea has decreased by almost 3% per decade. 3% per decade. That is change in the continental terrestrial component of water. Change in the continental terrestrial component of water. No, it does, Arvind. Climate change includes change in atmospheric composition also. Okay. So that's cryosphere change. Number 3 is, okay, a change in the ocean. Change in the ocean temperatures. From 1970s to 2020, from 1970s to 2020, oceans have warmed by 0.073 degrees centigrade. 0.073 degrees centigrade per decade. Per decade. There's a direct correlation between, there is a direct correlation between increasing ocean temperature and evaporation from the seas. Increasing ocean temperature and evaporation from the seas. The 4th is precipitation. 4th, precipitation. And now, the precipitation data varies from place to place. Varies from place to place. Okay. There are regional shifts. There are regional shifts. But the net effect is, more evaporation leading to more precipitation on an average. More evaporation leading to more precipitation on an average. Okay, so what is the net consequence of all of this? The net consequence is that the global and the terrestrial hydrological cycle has intensified by more than 15%. The global and the terrestrial hydrological cycle has intensified by more than 15%. What I mean by intensified? The time taken for evaporation, rainfall and back again. Agar ye lag raha tha, say 100 days, now it's faster, okay, by 15%. Okay? So the hydrological cycle has increased the pace of rotation. Head down. Now, iska manifestation kaisa hai? Ye to change ho gaya. What is the manifestation of an altered hydrological cycle? Dikhta kaise? How does it look like? How do we perceive it? How do we perceive it? Manifestation is increase in floods and droughts. Manifestation is increase in climate extreme events like cyclones, hurricanes, thunderstorms. Okay. We have got increased geohydrological disasters like landslides, like GLOF. Okay. We also have increased incidences of droughts and heat waves. The manifestation is forest fires. How does the altered hydrological cycle look like? It looks like more droughts and heat waves, forest fires, more floods and droughts, agriculture productivity impact, okay, more increase in climate extreme events, cyclones, hurricanes, typhoons, heat waves, okay, cold waves, bomb cyclones. You have heard this term, bomb cyclone? Okay. और इसी का मैनिफेस्टेशन है the Arctic amplification also, and increase in the geohydrological disasters. Increase in geohydrological disasters like landslides and GLOF. GLOF is glacial lake outburst floods. Correct. Floods. Okay. Glacial lake outburst. So unfortunately, last evening we had the Sikkim GLOF. All fine? Forest fires, more heat waves and more droughts will result in forest fires. Yes. No. See, do not write all impact of climate change. You focus on hydrological cycle-based climate change. सब कुछ मत लिख देना. Coral reef bleaching लिख दिया आपने. Okay, don't do all of that. Hydrological cycle से क्या impact हो रहा है, हमें वही लिखना है. Okay, so this is like a schematic. Now, what are the specific consequences of changing hydrological cycle? What are the specific consequences of changing hydrological cycle? So, Nashit, why floods and droughts together? See, well, some of you have not done this, others you have done it. When I say droughts, droughts are not because of less rains alone. Droughts are because of unpredictability of water resources. जब मुझे पानी चाहिए, तब पानी नहीं है. जब मुझे नहीं चाहिए, I have got floods. That results in droughts. So do not see droughts. In fact, this is one of the first sentence in the water management section of class 10th NCERT. Okay, droughts and water shortages are not a consequence of less rainfall alone. They're more a consequence of disruptions in water availability. Okay? So imagine this. Say in a dry area, I'm depending on the groundwater for my irrigation. But आपने क्या किया है? The hydrological cycle has been altered and the percolation has become less. If there is less percolation, you don't have groundwater. Will you have droughts or not? That's the idea. So, यहाँ पर वो समझा नहीं रहे हैं. I just mentioned that floods and droughts are a consequence of hydrological cycles. Okay, let's move on. Now, what are the specific consequences? Specific consequences में there is agriculture, irrigation consequence. Specific consequences में there are disruptions in the meteorological processes. Specific consequences में there are social and economic consequences. So when I say disruption in the meteorological process, rains are impacted. Okay, seasonality of monsoon process gets impacted. Meteorological process, we can have more events of cyclones. ये meteorological है. Because of this, agriculture water availability gets impacted, and because of this, we will have problems of farmers' income, out migration, food problems. Is it okay, all of you? Yeah, you can have out migrations, food shortages, farmers falling income. You can end up have rural depopulation, urban issues. You can go on there. Problems of health, problems of hygiene. Okay, long-term consequences of this can also be sea level changes as water keeps melting and adding to the seas. Yeah, you can go on there. So what I have done is, I have put all the components of hydrological cycle in one place now. Now look at this. Your smartness will be not wait for कि ये जब पूछेगा तब लिखोगे आप. You can have questions of three kinds. Climate change consequences, agriculture issues and consequences, or they can directly ask you about, okay, how in India things have changed because of monsoons, whatever. In all the answers, this can be part of one discussion. That all the impacts we are seeing of water, floods, landslides, it's a consequence of disruption of hydrological cycle. बना सकोगे आप लोग answer now? You see landslides of Uttarakhand, landslides of Himachal Pradesh, the GLOF of Sikkim. You talk about forest fires, you talk about sea level rise, droughts and irrigation problems. Sabka root hai, hydrological cycle has been impacted. So it's like, you have a tool with you. Ab kaise use karna hai is entirely your choice. So in this answer, I've given you 4 or 5 new tools. Ek tool diya maine. Think of hydrological cycle not simply evaporation and precipitation. It includes the components of runoff and infiltration. Fir maine aapko data de diya. Okay, how much temperature change, rainfall change, cryosphere change. Use that data where you can. And third, I've given you 2 schematics. Schematics around the manifestations and schematic around the specific consequences. Now you have to use it in different places. It's like, in answer writing, you need to have some building blocks with you. Building blocks, 10-15 tarike hote hain. Okay, so one building block I gave you was gradient winds. Okay, ab kuch bhi question पूछेगा winds पे, wind generating factors पे हो, cyclones पे हो, forces पे हो, like upper any question on wind, I'll try to find out some passage where one paragraph on super geostrophic and subgeostrophic can be added. This is one of those building blocks. Any question on agriculture, climate change, disruption of weather, farmers' poverty, out migrations, ek dal dena hai. All of this consequence of hydrological change impact, and you're on. All good, all of you? Okay, fine. So I'm done with this. Now, one diagram you could use. Now, dekho, this is a very nice diagram for any discussions on water issues. We have precipitation and rains. We have infiltration. We have surface runoff, and we have evaporation. Okay, these are the 4 components of how water moves in the system: precipitation and rains, infiltration, surface runoff, evaporation. Now, disruption of hydrological cycle ho, it is basically precipitation component is increasing, the infiltration component is decreasing, runoff is increasing, and this also is increasing. Right? This is what it is. Now, the consequence of kuch bhi aap major 4 hazard le lo. You take up, say, I call this as 1 component, I call this as 2, I call this as 3, I call this as 4. Okay. Why do landslides happen? Because of increasing 1 and 3. Correct? Why do landslides happen? 1 and 3. Why do we have floods? Again, it's because of 1 increase, 3 increase, and 2 decrease. Correct? Why do we have droughts? Droughts because 1 is unreliable. Okay, 2 has decreased, so I can't rely on groundwater. And 3 has increased, it runs off. Okay, can you give me example of increase 3 and droughts? Anybody? An example of increased runoff and we have droughts. Yes, Mehakdeep, all the hill areas. जितने hill areas में ये तो problem है और क्या है? Including Cherrapunji, including Mausin Ram. Heavy rainfall, but it all runs away. So in rainwater harvesting, हम क्या करना चाह रहे हैं? I'm trying to increase this and reduce this, correct? You're playing with these four components in lot of different discussions. So landslides, okay, in terms of this, floods in terms of this, droughts in terms of this, and you talk about component of water management is fundamentally managing 2 and 3. जो आपके rainwater harvesting, watershed development और rooftop harvesting तो कर रहे हैं. I want to stop runoff and wastage and increase infiltration. Can you use the diagram, all of you now? See, the whole idea of the conversation is we don't want good answers. We want bright, remarkable answers. Good answers तो हाँ मैंने पेज भर दिया. But a discussions that goes into this level tells examiner you understand the mechanism at a very deep level now. You have a different way of explaining the same problem. All fine? So hydrological cycle is one of those building blocks. Droughts में क्या लिखा है? Droughts में I said unreliable precipitation. Okay, plus percolation is less, so no more groundwater, and 3 is more, water runs away. इसमें भरोसा नहीं है, और जब rainfall होगा it runs away, and groundwater recharge not happening. Is it okay, all of you? So use this diagram in whatever way you can, and see to conserve words. These diagrams are very, very helpful. Many of you struggle with writing pace. One is learn to write fast. Second is write less and draw more. Explain less and show more. I bata diya, landslides in the hill areas, floods in the downstream locations and urban areas, droughts in the dry regions, and water management, wherever you talk about it. And I could specifically take up this one. This is a very good reason for droughts in any hill regions, including Cherrapunji, Mausin Ram, Uttarakhand, Western Ghats, wherever we want to apply. All good here? Okay, let's move on now. So what I gave you right now is not a model answer. I gave you all the inputs around hydrological cycle. अब आप उसको use करो in whatever way you want to use. Okay. Next question. Next question. Discuss how. Next question. Discuss how warmer climate will affect precipitation. Discuss how warmer climate will affect precipitation and its distribution. Precipitation and its distribution, including seasonality of climatic conditions, including seasonality of climatic conditions and the occurrence of extreme events. And the occurrence of extreme events. How does warmer climate affect precipitation and its distribution, impacting seasonality of the rainfall and the occurrence of extreme events? So climate change based question. Now see, these kind of questions, jisme ki there is a range of content to be written. I mean, you can go on and on like a thesis paper. What you do is, you pick up 5-6 important events and explain the answer through that. Okay, so how does it impact precipitation? How does it impact seasonality? How does it impact extreme events? Okay, the question hai कि tell us how it does it, and second, you must tell us where with examples batana hoga. In this question, you cannot write all the events. So pick up 6-7 important events first. Can you give me a list of events quickly? Give me examples of disruptions because of climate change and warming. Batao mujhe. I said be specific. Don't say flash floods. Be specific. Bangalore floods. I said be specific. Now you can talk about Sikkim and GOLF. Okay, you can talk about monsoon disruptions like triple dip La Nina and 2023 El Nino and western disturbances. Give me 6-7 such specific ones. Okay, you know about increased intensity of typhoons, of cyclones and hurricanes. Cyclone example is Biparjoy, yes, a very, very unique one in the Arabian Sea and impacting the Gujarat coast and Rajasthan. Okay, so agar aapke paas na Kerala floods theek hai, ab Aruna, you have gone beyond that now. जब पहली बार हुआ था, we were shocked there. उसके बाद every year we have got new events. So add Kerala, I'm not saying no, but make sure you have got something. So now it is Himachal floods. Now it is Pakistan floods. La Nina, okay, and this year's disruptions has caused Pakistan floods. Yes, the Hurricane Daniel, correct. Okay, you had one, your Medicane, yes, Daniel, Medicane in Mediterranean Sea, and impact was in Libya. Ye bahut important learning for all of you here. Do not write these answers in generic terms. Rainfall बढ़ गया, floods हो गया, droughts हो गया. It's a very unimpressive answers. You convert the answer towards some very specific example. Absolutely. Okay. Derma City, Libya, Medicane, Daniel. That's a good example. Okay. So आप listing करो आप इसको. You have got, okay, the Medicane. Medicane essentially is a hurricane of the Mediterranean Sea. Very powerful systems of hurricane. It's like a cyclone of Mediterranean Sea. Medicane. So you have this, the city called as Derna in Libya, and this hurricane Daniel. Excellent. Okay. I mean something more dramatic. Okay. 4-5 ho gaya, you have done. So I've taken up a range here. I've taken up one hurricane. I've taken up Indian Ocean wala Bay of Bengal Biparjoy. I've taken up India's monsoon triple dip. I've taken up GLOF, Bangalore floods. So you have got one example from the world, 3-4 of them from India. Add something else on the world. Impact of warmer conditions. Heat waves, yes. Talk about Europe heat waves. The heat waves of Europe. The heat waves of Europe. What stops you from mentioning Canada's wildfires? The worst one we have, both west maybe and also in the east. Quebec maybe hua hai, and in parts of the west also, correct. Yes, absolutely. Persistent droughts of Africa and its desertification. Okay, Sahel area has been impacted, including Somalia, Sudan, and the rest. Yes, correct. Very nice, Ajay. What else? What else are the impacts of global warming? Some of you in the class, you have talked about AMOC now, right? What stops you mentioning that? AMOC. You know about the impact of your Arctic आर्कटिक एम्प्लीफिकेशन. सो आपके मन में ना ये 7, 8, 10 पॉइंट्स होने चाहिए फर्स्ट. नाउ द क्वेश्चन वाज ऑन how the precipitation impact is happening, correct? So in precipitation, let us not write about AMOC. Let us not write about, okay, no, rest तो आ ही जाएगा आपका. Is all the rest is part of your precipitation impact, correct? No, desert locust invasion, okay, fine, linked to humidity, but I think this is good enough, correct? Look at the question again. Question is, discuss how warmer climate will impact precipitation and its distribution, the seasonality and occurrence of extreme events. So, extreme events में thunderstorms हैं, thunderstorms में Bangalore आ गया, thunderstorms में Himachal Pradesh आ गया, cyclones आ गया, droughts and floods are also extreme events, and you're on now. Now, desertification definitely is because of prolonged droughts. Is because of prolonged droughts. अब इस आंसर को आप ऐसे ही लिखोगे आप. So you start the answer. Now see, what are the tools? So look at the structuring. Okay, our storyline कैसे बनता है? The storyline. You start by saying that yes, there is climate change and there is weather and climate alterations and changes. How can you make this more specific? Anybody? हाँ, डेटा लिखेंगे. आपको डेटा दिया था ना अभी मैंने अभी आपको. Got it? How much warmer land, how much melting oceans, cryosphere impact. वो लिखा ना आपने. That is one data already with you. Just now I gave you. Use it here. So in questions, say there are 3-4 ways how to start an answer. One is definition type. अगर वो टेक्निकल वर्ड है तो, a very smart technical word like what are medicanes, what are geostrophic winds, what is hydrological cycle, I can define if I know a good one, what are gradient winds, define it there. The second is start the answer with some concrete data facts, lage ki you know the thing in more detail. So yes, climate change. And according to IPCC, this is what has happened. Okay, this is what happened. You have got data. उसको आप table में डाल दो. So one format I recommend everybody is, देखो, when you are under time pressure, आपका instinct क्या होता है? Instinct is writing more or drawing more? What's the instinct? Writing more. Okay, जब time constraint होगा ना, आप थोड़ी बैठ के बोलोगे रुको मैं ड्राइंग बना लेता हूं. You'll feel like writing more. So when you write an answer and you run out of time, will you ever draw a diagram? No. But आप क्या करोगे? Okay, you all know that diagram is an important part. So my suggestion to all of you is draw the diagram first. It's like a tool I tell my students. Every answer, हर पेज में एक sketch होना चाहिए. At least one sketch. One small map, one small table, one small schematic, one flow chart. That's your choice. So the typical technique I suggest is, in your structure of the answer, you have introduction, maybe of 2, 3, 4 lines, and directly get into a diagram. That's why all my model answers में आपको diagram दिखाई देगा पहले पेज के second paragraph में. It's very deliberate. Okay, because this diagram, what it does is, okay, it gives you a good sense of, okay, the entire answer का structure also. आप क्या लिखेंगे, नहीं लिखेंगे. So this data I gave you, draw a schematic on this. I could do this. This is a climate change consequence. Okay, one of which is, I said, temperature change. One of which is the change in the cryosphere. One of change is the oceans. One change is, okay, the precipitation. And I could write down something here, something here. This looks like a nice, good sketch. So, जो bullets वाले points हैं, put them in this type of schematic and diagrams. So your introduction, ये दोनों मिला के introduction हो गया. 2 lines. Yes, there is climate change, global warming happening, this is an event something, and this is what it looks like. Then you switch towards the body. So you have introduction, followed by a diagram or some visual cue that you have. Then you move towards the body and let the body of this kind be arranged in terms of events. So heading is the consequences of warm climate. Okay, so precipitation changes. Number 1. Okay, talk about cloudbursts of Bangalore. So आपका जो case study है वही बन जाएगा one point of discussion. So people ask me, sir, how do we write a case study? Just give me 1 minute. I will show you something. Just a minute. I forgot to get it. All of you. So last couple of days, I was looking through the NCERTs to find out what can I take from NCERTs. Because a lot of questions, GS may, optional maybe, they get mapped here. I'll give some examples to all of you. Look at this passage. This is class 10th NCERT, social science contemporary. Okay, class 10th, geography for class 10th. ठीक है? जो बता रहा था मैं, look at this statement. And these are questions optional में भी, GS में भी. You all see this, right? It says, given the abundance and renewability of water, it's difficult to imagine that we may suffer from water scarcity. Water abundant bhi hai or water renewable bhi hai. Yet we have water scarcity. Okay. We visualize deserts of Rajasthan, women balancing matkas for collecting water. True, the availability of water resources varies over time and space, mainly due to variations in seasonal annual precipitation, but water scarcity in most cases is because of overexploitation, excessive use, and unequal access of water. Very powerful idea, no? Class 10th में okay, पहले पेज में लिखा हुआ है. Somebody asked me, why do we have droughts when there is more rainfall? ये reasons है. और इसी में look at how, I mean, if you read this chapter is chapter number, what number क्या है इसका? Number 3. Okay, all about water resources. इसी chapter में rainwater harvesting. Okay. While explaining, look at the example of a case study. People have a challenge कि कैसे बनाया जाए case study. So it talks about that there is a rooftop rainwater harvesting system. An example की तरफ से it says Gendathur receives precipitation of 1000 mm with 80% collection efficiency. 100 fillings, every house can collect about water. From 200 houses, the net amount of rainwater is 1 lakh liters. This is your case study. You want specific one? Okay. Rainwater harvesting is the most common practice in Shillong, Meghalaya. Cherrapunji, Mawsynram, this acute water shortages, every household now has rainwater harvest structure. Example denge, how water is managed. This is your case study. So rather than see what problem I face in your checking evaluation is, say if you write down that there are floods. What you guys do is there is more rainfall and there are floods because of a reduced percolation, because of concretization, floods because of bad drainage. And example is Bangalore. This is a typical answer most of you will write down. Not wrong. But ये जो लिखा आपने ना, increase concretization, this is so generic. It does not look like कि आपने UPSC की पढ़ाई की हुई है. So I am seeing answer. I am seeing answer 1, answer 2, answer 3, answer 4, answer 5. सारे ऐसे लिखे हुए हैं. I want some change here. What you do is floods. Example case study Bangalore. Okay, Bangalore and its uncontrolled urbanization and concretization has been responsible for recent floods. Bangalore, city of lakes, the largest one may be the Bilandur Lake. You could draw the diagram of Bangalore and show where we have Bilandur Lake. Okay, and in Bangalore, the lakes are important water sinks. The lakes help in increase the percolation of rainfall. Bangalore is already at a higher elevation and receives consistent rains. Bangalore ka rule yahi hai. Agar garmi ho gaya, sham tak rainfall ho jayega. Every day it can rain. Okay, some shower or the other. So Bangalore already is an area of high precipitation. Plus, on top of this, if there is encroachment of lakes, of local streams, so there are local streams here. We'll draw that and discuss the urbanization. So there are 3-4 watersheds here. The water drains like this and like this and like this. There's a Hebbal Basin and all of that. So if you write down, the lakes are water sinks and encroachment blocks all of that. This results in the poor water percolation and therefore increased runoff. So compare this discussion about Bangalore with this one. Which one looks like you have studied the topic well? That's what we want. So when you write generic points, when you write, so abhi bhi likhoge aap, for example, Sikkim, geolog, be very specific. Sikkim in the Himalayas, heavy rainfall regions, glaciated regions, in recent times melting of the Himalayan glacier Sikkim mein, source of river Teesta and its tributaries. There are at least 15 dams of small systems across different steeps of Sikkim, one of which was the now what was that lake's name? Longhe. Lonak, yes, Lonak, yes, correct, LH1. Lonak Lake, and because of increased precipitation, the dam, okay, on Chungthang, right? And whatever you are down there. That's a better answer than, okay, heavy rainfall and lake burst. Example, Sikkim. So what I'm suggesting to all of you is, don't write generic and then give example as in one word. Aap isko ulta karo. Let the whole discussion be the heading here. Okay, so heavy rainfall, lake breach, dam collapse and floods. Or iske baare mein likho in total. And like this, other examples where heavy rainfalls in Kerala impacting the Periyar drainage, okay, and the dam systems of Kerala. Did I help you understand this point now, all of you? So when you write an answer on this question, I gave you a list of what are the events? अब आप इस event से उठाओ, यदि event से आप उठाएंगे, not all of them, pick up 4 or 5 of them. So one example of floods ho, one example of cyclones ho, one example of heat waves and forest fires kar lo, and don't forget El Nino, La Nina, a very important part of seasonal variations of the rains. So 5-6 points. So a typical structure will be, okay, introduction with some data. Some amount of data can go into a diagram. The body starts, divide the body into the major rainfall disruption events. Okay, and maybe 2 events here, 2 events here, 2 events here, ek paragraph mein, with examples like case studies, and then you conclude. Make sense, all of you? Yeah, what was that, Jayant? Yeah, you can do that. Yes. Yes, I'm recommending that, Vartika. Let the case studies become your subheadings. Jahan par your listing is a very regular mundane listing. So I ask you, discuss the impact. Say if I ask you a question, discuss the impact of, say, migrations in different parts of the country. So impact of migration, maybe urban housing problems. Impact of migration, maybe conflicts. Impact of migration could be maybe rural depopulation and agriculture problem. Impact of migration probably is also problems related to slums and so on. Okay? Don't write like this. You write as examples. Impact of migration. Okay. Delhi in migration and increase of, okay, whatever, and housing problems and some data there becomes a case study. Okay. Conflicts. You can take a global example, whatever example you have. Conflicts because of migration. Take up your migration because of your Rohingyas and what conflicts you have in parts of Bengal, Assam, or illegal migrations impacting Tripura and Assam and their demographics. I hope you got the point here. So wherever you have a range of listing type of answer, switch the discussion with case studies. And case studies आपके regular news से ही आएंगे. All done? Achha. So that's one building block. Now you go towards conclusion. Let all the conclusions of climatology in particular be around what are the programs, what are the schemes, and what are the recent, okay, approaches to deal with climate change and climate issues. कोई भी answer आएगा, okay, for climatology question, you can always converge towards some, अगर cyclone पे है, talk about national cyclone disaster management. Agar say question is on probably rainfall issues or heat waves, talk about what we are doing for reducing climate change induced global warming. Okay? So take a fresh page and take down like a summary content from my side. Likh lo up. Programs, schemes, give heading. Programs, schemes, and approaches to deal with climate change. Program, schemes, and approaches to deal with climate change. So number 1, A dalo. A. Impact of climate change. I'm giving you some data on this now. Impact of climate change. Okay, write down. If emissions related climate change is not handled or is not managed, if emissions related climate change is not managed, India could suffer economic losses of more than $35 trillion US. more than 35 trillion US dollars, which could impact India's economy and social development. 35 trillion US dollars over a span of 30 years. So by 2050 हम बता रहे हैं. If emissions related climate change not addressed, India could suffer economic losses of more than 35 trillion USD by 2030. Okay, which could impact India economically and in the social sector. Number two, according to RBI, precipitation and temperature are the two most important climate indicators for economic and social development. Two important climatic indicators for social and economic development. Because about 45% of population is engaged in agriculture. 45% of population is engaged in agriculture, contributing to about 17-18% of GDP. 18% of GDP. India's GDP could be 90% lower than its potential. India's GDP could be 90% lower than its potential. 90. In 2100 because of climate change. Right, next, South Asia includes India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. As the three most climate vulnerable countries. Of the world. Bangladesh number 1 में आता है. Climate vulnerable countries of the world. India is already having 2/3 of its land as drought prone. More than 10% of its land as flood prone. And 8% of its land as cyclone prone. 2/3 of its land as drought prone, more than 10% of its land as flood prone, and about 8% of its land as cyclone prone. India's economic dependency on agriculture makes its population one of the highest makes its population one of the highest. Climate sensitive communities. Climate sensitive communities. Okay? So ये आपका डेटा रहेगा. Emphasize, कोई भी climate change का discussion होगा, take it towards this. वो paper 1 में हो, paper 2 में हो. You say that, well, see, if India, South Asia together are about 20-25% of the world's population, there's a big reason we can't ignore this even in paper 1. Your data to emphasize, we are vulnerable. Okay, let's move on. Now, what are the initiatives taken? So in today's class, I will not discuss in detail, but just give you the points. Initiatives taken. Number one is India has eight national missions under NAPCC. 8 national missions under NAPCC, National Action Plan on Climate Change. 8 missions kya hai, likh lo aap log. Now use this in terms of a schematic maybe. What are those 8 missions? 8 missions are, number 1 is solar mission. Number 2 is enhanced energy efficiency mission. Number 3 is sustainable habitat mission. इसमें urbanization आ जाएगा. Sustainable habitat mission. Number 4 is water mission. 5 is sustaining Himalayan ecosystem as a mission. The next is a strategic knowledge mission for climate change. Next is National Mission for Green India. ये forest वाला है. And last one is National Mission on Sustainable Agriculture. Okay. ये जो mission है, it was launched in 2008. And then on we are working, expanding the scope of this. Okay. So इसको आप बना के रख लो. A schematic form में 8 missions. Keep it ready for any discussion on climate change. Drop this one. Next slide down. Under the above approach of missions, all the states have developed their SAPCC, State Action Plan on Climate Change. Okay. The next point. The following are the main initiatives driven by India. I've taken up one sentence from PIB. Yes, Pawan. All of this, update yourself from PIB. So, wo acha likha hai, it can also become a question as a frame. It says, even though India is not a part of the problem, India is part of the solution for global warming and doing more than its fair share. A very powerful statement. Likho aap isko. It's going to be a part of your conclusion statement. Even though, next point likho aap. Even though, see guys, I'm not giving an answer to you, right? I'm giving you all those building blocks. How will you use all of that into an answer format? So, although India is not a part of the problem, the historical emissions are not India's contributions. India is not a part of the problem. India is, however, part of the solution. And doing more than its fair share. and doing more than its fair share. So under fair, what are we doing? 1, 2, 3, 4 point. Number 1, I said India and its NAPCC. That's 1. India and its NAPCC. That's 1. Number 2, all the states have their SAPCC. That's number 2. Number 3 is India's NDC as a part of Paris Agreement 2015. India's NDCs as a part of Paris Agreement 2015. उसमें कम से कम 2-3 लिख लेना. Okay, 1 is to reduce emissions intensity by 45%. To reduce emissions intensity, emissions per capita, emissions intensity by 45% from 2005 level by 2030. From 2005 level by 2030. Then 50% of electricity from non-fossil fuel based resources. 50% of its electricity from non-fossil fuel based sources. Achieving net zero emission target. Achieving net zero emission target by 2070. And 3 new initiatives. Next one. 3 new initiatives by India. One is CDRI, climate disaster resilience infrastructure. CDRI, climate disaster resilient infrastructure, kind of a global collaboration. That's 1. Number 2 is the Global Biofuel Alliance. Global Biofuel Alliance. Number 3 is life philosophy. And you can always add here life. New initiatives में life आएगा. LIFE, life philosophy. Okay, and just a minute. I will just add here, I don't have the detail with me. India's Panch Amrit strategy. India's Panch Amrit strategy, as discussed and adopted in COP 26. As discussed and adopted in COP 26. See, what happens is, all of us know these things. लेकिन आप geography लिखने बैठते हो, I've rarely seen people use this in the answers. Your lines of optional and your GS has now blurred. And across optionals, current affairs आपको लाना ही पड़ेगा as a part of your conversations. ठीक है? Okay, wait, don't go. I was slow because of the power issue. Okay. Those are surprised. You are underestimating my speed. Next slide down. Next question. Discuss Arctic amplification. Discuss Arctic amplification and its consequences in the strength and the position of global circulation systems. Global circulation systems. Okay. Arctic amplification. What are its causes? What are its consequences? And I'm asking in context of some global circulations. Okay, that's your question. So Arctic amplification or Antarctic amplification is essentially the rapid warming of the Arctic and the Antarctic regions. These are the two largest and the most extensive cryosphere zones of the Earth. Okay. In our Earth, there are 4 areas of extensive cryosphere. What's cryosphere? The ice and the frozen parts of the Earth is cryosphere. ये cryosphere कहाँ पर है? We have Arctic, we have Antarctic. A very large one is, yes, the Himalayas, and the others are the miscellaneous scattered mountains and elevations. इसमें आपका you have your Alps, you have Rockies, the Andes, you can go on there. Of these, Arctic, Antarctic, these are the largest cryosphere zones, and this is the next largest one. Okay? So this is now, I just now mentioned this, that since 1970s and 2020s tak, the Arctic and the Antarctic average warming is more than 0.073 centigrade per decade. Mention किया आपको मैंने? Doubt data इसके अंदर में. That's how they are warming. The warming is 0.7073 degrees centigrade per decade. Rate of warming. This is the rate of Arctic amplification. The consequence, in what ways? Now see, the Arctic and the Antarctic, they control 3-4 things about our Earth. One is, they are a very important part of Earth's albedo systems. जो हमारा solar heat budget है, it's managed partly because of the albedo systems of the Arctic and the Antarctic. That's one. Number 2, Arctic, Antarctic, they maintain the equator to poles latitudinal pressure gradient in the upper troposphere. I think all of you understand this. Above the equator, we have relative high pressure. At the poles, we have relative low pressure. So if I do not have Arctic, Antarctic, this equator to poles latitudinal pressure gradient will not exist. And if this doesn't exist, your upper tropospheric winds will get impacted. And the third very important is that these control ocean circulations. I think now all of you know about what is brine rejection. Brine rejections are referred to as a part of ocean pumping mechanism. The water is pumped down and it moves across the oceans. So you all know about the thermo-haline currents. We know about the AMOC. So when I'm saying how does Arctic, Antarctic impact global circulations, this circulation, जो word मैंने use किया है, Okay, this circulation is both atmospheric circulation and also oceanic circulation. Okay, so Arctic and Antarctic are part of all of this. Now, ये सारा चीज आपको डालना होगा within the first half page. Diagrams, schematics के साथ में. So if I was writing this in my answer, see what I would do. I would start with an introduction. I would say what is Arctic and Antarctic amplification. It is heating. I would talk about the temperature कितना बढ़ रहा है. The consequence of which is, okay, it impacts the circulation, atmospheric and oceanic. ये कहने के बाद में I would have drawn, okay, a diagram. In the diagram, I would first have a schematic. That Arctic Antarctic amplification or this temperature, it controls albedo. It controls the equator to pole pressure gradient. It controls oceanic circulations. Okay, I would have okay drawn this Arctic region, Antarctic region. Okay, the two most important cryosphere regions. Okay, and global warming is causing melting of these. That's about it. So I have put some data. ये सारा discussions जो भी बताया मैंने ना, I put it here. Add couple of words here, add couple of words here, add couple of words here. So this one is taken care of now, all of you. Okay, ये जो मैंने बताया as a part of okay discussions, this is your own addition part. You should know this part. Okay, and the data, everything, I put it here. See, for most of us, when we are learning answer writing, the focus is on, sir, give me points. My answer is, give me points is a wrong word. You must ask us, sir, give me right phrases. And how do I structure and present that? वो हमारा fight है. Look at what we did for hydrological cycle. I was giving you right phrases, no? आपको सही words दे रहे थे. And structuring. How do you use it? What diagrams you use? What flowcharts you are using? So all the content I taught in the last 15 minutes में, मैंने कहा खत्म करो इसको. Okay, less than half a page. 2 lines here. This is over. The impact, okay, the importance is over. Now come towards what are the consequences of okay Arctic amplification. Again, I said, the moment you have a listing of things, you go specific there. And specific में बहुत important है, you must have a sense of priority. Okay, let me, before I come back here, first tell me, give me the list of consequences of Arctic amplification. बताओ one, two, three बताओ मुझे. All of you, please think through this. Give me a list of the consequences of Arctic amplification. One is, think all of us know AMOC has become weaker. The Gulf Stream has become weaker. What else? Yeah? What else has happened? Well, Arctic is melting, so sea level rise is happening. Yeah, marine heat waves. Okay, marine heat waves happening. Yeah, sorry? Opening of the new sea routes. So optimism personified. Opening of the new sea routes. Fine, ठीक है. Okay, hydrological cycle gets impacted. Fine. What else? Yes. 6 is there is a release of methane, carbon dioxide from the Arctic ice. Okay, it does something. What else? Yeah. Polar vortex. There is what? There is a weakening of the polar vortex. Weakening of the polar vortex. पोलर वोर्टेक्स होता क्या है? This is the globe. This is the polar jet stream and the Rossby waves. This happens because of the gradient, and when the gradient becomes less, these winds will start moving slowly. Okay, this is the polar jet stream. This part of the Rossby waves. They are very fast and a part of what's called as the polar vortex. Okay, polar vortex. So because of the warming here, the equator to pole का जो pressure gradient है वो कम हो जाता है. Because of which the PGF becomes weak. The PGF becomes weak, this movement becomes weak. The upper tropospheric winds and the polar jet streams are weakening. So it's called as a weakening of the polar vortex. So fine, लिख लिया आपने. What else? Disruption of the heat budget. Disruption of the heat budget. What else? Disruptions in the mid latitude weather. So I want all of you to write as I'm writing, okay? आपको मैं कुछ सिखा रहा हूं. I'm not dictating an answer to you. Okay. So अगर मैं लिख रहा हूं, आप भी लिखें, और जो गलत होगा I'll cross off eventually. You also know कि इसको नहीं लिखना था. Okay. Westerlies are weakening. Okay. Westerlies are weakening. Have you not heard about the droughts and the heat waves of Europe? Droughts and heat waves of North America? Have you heard about the bomb cyclones of parts of North America? Yeah. What about higher intensity of hurricanes of Atlantic Ocean? Add karo, hurricanes of Atlantic Ocean. I'm sure you've heard about omega blocking. Likh lo, we'll come back and discuss it afterwards. So 13 is something called as omega blocking. Okay? Now watch, listen. Yeah, you have got, what are bomb cyclones? Shweta, these are basically very powerful cyclones. And why bomb? Because the impact is very high. Okay, and these cyclones are linked to heavy snowfall. Okay, typically सिर्फ coast पे नहीं है, even inside Great Lake regions में. Look up what are bomb cyclones. Yes, Rossby waves. Now listen. There are 12, 13 points. Can you write detail about each one of them? You cannot. आप answer में maximum you can elaborate 4 or 5 points. You cannot write more than that. ठीक है? अब आप बताओ, आप क्या क्या उठाना चाहोगे? Will you want to pick up AMOC and Gulf Stream slowing down? Yes, agreed. Okay. Will you write about Arctic melting and sea level rise? Okay, you won't say yes. Marine heat waves? Okay, yes. सब में yes बोलोगे, ठीक है. Open sea routes? Yes. I don't know. Okay. Omega blocking looks like a smart concept. So if you knew this, you would have written about this. If you know about bomb cyclone, आप ये लिखना चाहेंगे. I'm sure you will want to write about, the polar vortex. Okay. You'll want to write about the release of carbon dioxide and from the Arctic regions. Yes. So you decide. आप किस पे नहीं लिखोगे in detail. See, there are two parts. One is the answer के paragraph में क्या लिखना है, और दूसरा जो नहीं लिख पाएंगे, I'll put them in a box side में. ठीक है? So what I'm not saying don't write. I'm saying tell me which one you'll put in a diagram and leave it. ये भी impact है. Okay. So tell me which one will you prefer putting in a box? If I was you, I would put sea level rise in the box. मरीन हीट वेव्स को मैं मर्ज कर देता along with AMOC maybe. AMOC and this opening of sea routes, I think we'll put in a box. Okay. Droughts in the mid latitudes. Okay. This also I can put in a box. So if I list down what are the 3-4 things that I will want to write on. Okay. I will want to write on number 1 that the equator, polar, PGF weakens, and therefore the polar vortex weakens because of the polar jet stream weakening, and therefore what happens? Dekho, this polar vortex, this is responsible for keeping all the cold air towards the poles. Yahan par you have got the cold air. You have got the Arctic air mass on this side. And these parts, they will have relatively warmer mid-latitude air masses. When the polar vortex becomes weak, ye niche aa jayega. Okay, the polar vortex will shift tropicwards. So the cold air of the Arctics will start coming towards the mid-latitudes. So polar vortex weakening, the polar jet stream is weakening, and there is influx of cold polar air masses towards the mid-latitudes, impacting severe winters in the US, in Canada, in parts of Siberia too. So my heading for this is a weakening of polar vortex, and this heading में मैंने लिखा detail. इसी का consequences है the bomb cyclone. Is that okay? So I'm clubbing things together now. Bomb cyclone. All done? Okay. The next one. आपको क्या लगता है इसमें लिस्ट में नेक्स्ट इंपॉर्टेंट कौन सा दिख रहा है आपको? So polar vortex done. Okay. And my bomb cyclone is done. What else? The link to this is this phenomena called as omega blocking. So I'll come back here. Number 2. Okay. Omega blocking and heat waves. And heat waves. So what happens is when the polar vortex is becoming slow. Okay. See, remember what a Rossby wave has? याद आ रहा है आपको? Rossby waves have upper tropospheric high pressure, low pressure. It has low pressure, high pressure. This location will be location of a temperate cyclone. This location of temperate anticyclone. ऊपर low होगा तो नीचे क्या होगा? High pressure होगा. So I've got a low pressure, a high pressure. I have a surface low pressure, surface high pressure. There is a cyclone, anticyclone, a cyclone, anticyclone, and the whole thing will keep on rotating. But when the polar vortex becomes slow, this west to east movement becomes slow. Okay. और अगर ये summers में हो रहा है, this anticyclone is what? Calm conditions. It is stable air and warm है, तो ये वाला यहाँ पर फंस जाता है. Okay. So what happens is the polar vortex slowing result in slowing of west to east cyclones and anticyclones in the mid latitudes. And the polar vortex है क्या? Polar vortex essentially is the polar jet stream. It essentially is the Rossby waves. So when the polar vortex is slowing down, the west to east cyclones and anticyclones in the mid latitudes also start to slow down. तो क्या होगा, जहां पर anticyclones हैं, there air is calm, air is warm, and it gets trapped there for a longer time. And that's what increases the temperature dramatically. Otherwise, it was moving, the high pressure is replaced by a low pressure, I can have rainfall, I can have fronts movements. Okay, so ये जो रुक गया है, this is what is called as blocking. Okay, this west to east movement slowing down is called as blocking. The cyclones are getting blocked. ये cyclone यहां से इधर नहीं आ पा रहा है. It's getting blocked. It's called as the blocking mechanism. In the blocking mechanism, the anticyclones and the warm conditions, they become stationary, causing severe heat waves. They become stationary, causing severe heat waves. अब इस diagram में क्या है? In this diagram, okay, you have this shape. Okay, ये जो shape है, okay, this is looking like the Greek letter omega. Omega आपने देखा होगा, ऐसे लिखते हैं हम लोग. This, that's why it's called as omega blocking. Omega blocking in Canada caused heat waves, and extreme blocking can result in forest fires. Omega blocking forest fires, east में भी हुआ है, west में भी हुआ है, British Columbia, and even in parts of Ontario and Quebec. ठीक है? So your 2 points done. To discuss, number one is, okay, the polar vortex slowing, इसी के साथ linked है polar vortex. What's the third one you will discuss now? Third क्या discuss करोगे बताओ? You have done two atmospheric. Okay, you can leave here, no issues. Okay, don't get so formal with me. Okay, you go, come back, not a problem. Okay, you don't have to be so formal. Okay, fine. So third one is, take up one of the oceans now. Keep a bit of diversity. आपने दो उठाया एटमॉस्फेयर का, अब एक दो उठाओ ओशंस पे. एमॉक, ओके, एमॉक में क्या होगा? The Atlantic meridional ocean circulation is slowing down. Why is it slowing down? Because of reduced brine rejection. The Atlantic waters are getting warmer. Okay. Because of this, the Gulf Stream is also getting slow. And Atlantic water slowing down, AMOC slowing down, iska consequence hoga, the hurricanes of Atlantic oceans are increasing. It's all linked as a part of one story. See, ocean acidification, wo Arctic melting ho na ho, वैसे हो जाता. See, Rahul, this is a problem. So I'm asking Arctic amplification. You are writing ocean acidification in general. That is a mistake. Write about what's happening because of Arctic melting. ठीक है? बालाजी, इंडिया तक बहुत ज्यादा स्कोप है नहीं. Okay. Arctic amplification impact on India is still not as much indirect. Indirect hoga definitely. Oh yes. Once you have done this, the Gulf Stream slowing and the Arctic warming, अब इसका consequences होगा. Okay, your Grand Banks fishing gets impacted. इसका consequence होगा. Okay, the water impacts. The water impacts. अब Arctic है, तो Antarctic impact भी होगा. This impacts also the Pacific fishing because the mixing of warm and cold, okay, that gets impacted. AMOC is the vertical circulations. All done here? Okay. आप बताओ अब कौन सा point अब आपका बच रहा है? You cannot write more than I said 4-5 points. Okay. So heat waves chhode, this you have done, this you have done. Yes. This blocking thing can also cause droughts. वो आप add कर सकते थे. Heat waves and droughts. And the remaining issues ko put them in a box. The long-term impacts are, okay, coral bleaching, ocean acidification. There is a positive feedback cycle because Arctic melting also releases a lot of methane, carbon dioxide, which otherwise was trapped in. So now you can make a schematic of sorts. The other impacts of Arctic amplification. Other impacts, talk about the Arctic sea routes. You can talk about ocean acidification. You can talk about marine heat waves. You can mention the impact of ocean acidification, the release of methane and carbon dioxide, and whatever you want to add. Is it okay, all of you? Conclusion. Okay. Essentially, Arctic amplification, Antarctic amplification, both are the consequence of climate change. Ab climate change bolo, global warming bolte hi, shift towards Paris deal now. Talk about Glasgow. Say that India also contributing indirectly. Baki kahani aapke paas mein hai. Talk about climate change funds, finance. Conflicts may increase, okay, because of resources, fishing impacts, and so on. Yeah, you can go on there. Okay? So, in today's discussion, I tried teaching you 3-4 things. Yeah, let me sum up now. We can all leave thereafter. So I repeat this. Don't see the sessions as I giving you answer dictations. Yeah, I'll give you content, I'll enrich you. But more important is you have to learn how to think on answers. So what did you learn? One is you have to start learning the specific terms. I demonstrated this through hydrological cycle. You must have interesting ways how to depict. So आपको वो graph दिखाया, arrow mark दिखाया for hydrological cycles, flow charts. So think on the diagrams. Think on the flow charts. Third, any answer that has lot of listing of points, convert that into a case study based discussions. What's the impact of agriculture poverty? Case study. Impact of agriculture poverty in hill areas. Impact in Bundelkhand. Impact in urban migration and probably urban conflicts. Impact in terms of food security. आप इसको heads बनाकर discuss through case. Make it as specific as possible. And then I said, in the conclusion, move towards programs, move towards specifics in terms of schemes and initiatives. All good here? Yeah, this is where you have the case studies. So most of you have a struggle. So how to add case studies? आपको मैंने दिखाया पढ़ के, how लिखते में ही आपको, अच्छा, by the way, when you say case study, a case study must have 4 things. Case study must have a specific name of a place. अगर specific name है, try drawing a diagram or a map. वो है कहां पर? Don't say problem Delhi and keep quiet. Then you draw a map of Delhi and tell us northeastern Delhi में ये problem है. Southern Yamuna banks में ये problem है. Okay, so that's one. Our third thing is put some data, put some facts, I want some numbers. Don't just say earthquake. Example, okay, Turkish earthquake. You draw Turkey, draw the map of that area, tell us how many died, how many impacted, what was the loss, maybe the date if you remember, kuch facts and data hona chahiye. Okay, and case study mein, I said it could be India, it could be the world, but to make your life easy, focus more on Indian case studies. तो पेपर 1 में अप्लाई कर लोगे, पेपर 2 में अप्लाई कर लोगे आप. ठीक है? And from now on, I'll recommend the topics we are covering, have a separate diary, and the newspapers you read or any book you have read. Okay, try making a compilation of case studies of climate change, impact, case studies of climate interventions, say case study of India and climate change. Jitna likha hai sara Indian case study hai. Whatever I wrote right now in the morning and in this evening class, it's all about case study of what India is doing. Okay, so make a booklet of these case studies or isko across GS paper mein use karna. The beauty of this topic is paper 1, paper 2, paper 3 and ethics sab mein kaam aayega aapka. You're making for geography, you'll use it across papers. और पूरे answer script में अगर आपको 5-7 good case studies हैं, your marks on average will increase dramatically. ठीक है? Okay, I'm still short of one more question, but then you all will become question marks. So I think you have a class tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll discuss one climatology. I'll shift towards oceanography thereafter. So कुल मिला के आपके पास अब 5 या 6 questions हैं from the class plus the 10 questions, and I'll upload more questions today itself. Bye. Tomorrow 4 o'clock again. Bye.